Good evening. If it's 6 p.m. on a Wednesday, you know what time it is. It's time for Off the Record, the Real Talk podcast. My name is Allie Braswell. I have the pleasure and privilege of hosting the Off the Record conversation where we delve into some of the things that go on behind the scenes, the conversations that often take place that we may not be party to, but there, if we had the understanding or had that mentorship or that coaching, that knowledge, we could make incredible decisions that propel ourselves forward. I want to pause and just say thank you for being with me this far. All of you who have subscribed and followed and liked and shared, thank you so much because can't do this without you. Would ask that you continue to share, continue to comment, send me some feedback, and let me know what this means to you, what topics we might talk about with you. Off the record, the Real Talk podcast wants to delve into those conversations that will plus you up, help you move forward. As we move forward, today's series is all about building powerful relationships. Other topics we may tackle may even bring in a little bit of challenge and having that discussion because that's what this is all about. Is being transparent, being unscripted, being unfiltered, and being unapologetic about the conversations that we have to help people move forward with their careers, their lives, as we did in the Pivot series, talking about life and career. That change will come, but do we have a plan to get through the uncertainty and pivot towards success? So today's topic, as I welcome you back, is all about scholarship. Scholarship is another element on the SHIPS framework that I wrote in Engage, Invest, Grow. Would encourage you to step out there and purchase a copy. Go out to Amazon or go to my website, get your own copy. And navigate with me as we go through these different pieces of the SHIPS framework, which is all about how to build mutually rewarding, beneficial relationships. Easy for me to say, but you know what I'm really talking about is how do you get the most out of the relationships that you have? Again, I'll make sure I get it clear. I'm talking about business and community relationships. There are many people who are well versed on talking about personal relationships like with your spouse or your significant other. And I would encourage you, seek them out as well. Seek out their podcast, learn from what you can from others' lived experiences. Today's episode, as I said, is about scholarship. And no, I'm not talking about elementary school or learning in classrooms or diplomas or even writing a check for a young person to go to college. What I'm really speaking to here is a commitment to learn about each other, a commitment to learning, and maybe in some cases, unlearning some beliefs that we may have and relearning some things that we may have forgotten as we move about building powerful teams and individuals for success. Really, I'm talking about developing a cultural humility and emotional intelligence that is required in today's society to lead, build, and relate across differences. Many may say that a lot of people in Washington, D.C. right now could use listen to the Off the Record podcast, tune them in, point them in this direction, because we're going to talk about things that are going to help us move forward. You know, one of the things that I think is important for people to understand is really to understand what I mean by that definition of scholarship. You know, I came about it when I was putting together the SHIPS framework because so one of the things that people need to do is spend time learning about each other. You see, I truly believe when we listen and we learn from those conversations and listen with an intent to hear, leveraging the 3 A's of listening, which is having the right attitude and open-mindedness to hear another person's perspective and point of view. A lot of times we listen with the intent to respond and not with the intent to hear. But I'm really saying as we listen, let's learn from the conversations because most people will tell you what they're looking for in terms of the environment they want to work in terms of the teams that they want to work on, and in terms of who the people they want to work with. So if we listen with an intent to hear, leveraging the right attitude, having the aptitude towards listening to pull out the salient points that are going to help move us forward, and then adjusting along the way, which I call the 3 A's, well documented, not my term, but well documented terms for how to listen with the intent to hear. Once we are listening, let's learn from the conversation. Let's learn from that conversation so that we can build up that rapport and that understanding of each other that leads to, like I said, learning to understand, not just to know. Many people listen and they hear and they say, "Well, I know about that, but did you really understand the context, the information that was being shared? Did you really get to know that person to say whether or not you could move into a true and meaningful partnership with them as we move through the ship's framework?" I believe truly that scholarship is rooted in having a sincere curiosity about each other, really understanding and saying, I really want to develop and learn something about the people who I choose to build business relationships with, or who I choose to get engaged with in my community engagement work or my giving back to the community. If we take the time to learn about each other, it helps us to make better informed decisions and understand whether or not, as I share in the book, whether or not we have shared outcomes. Do we even have a belief system that brings us together, and can we create that trust and comparison, and that trust and transparency is what I want to say, that are foundational to engagement. When you take a look at it and you see that scholarship, as I stated, is rooted in curiosity and not just credentials. Many people look to seek relationships with people who have a lot of letters behind the comma after their name. What are you bringing to the table? What are you bringing to understand and help understand them and help them understand whether or not you have commonalities to be able to move forward? I can remember in a body of work where one of the people who I sought to build a relationship, I really needed to understand who they were so that I can make sure that I was bringing value to the relationship. And the relationship catalyst turned out to be a networking event that we were going to both be at. And people said, I needed to meet this person. Well, rather than just go in willy nilly and just walk up and say, "Hey, I'm Allie Braswell," I took a moment just to study and learn a little bit about the person. Who is the person that had the great credentials, but who is that person? What were their pursuits? Where were the commonalities that we potentially could align on that would tell me whether or not this was someone that I wanted to invest time, talent, and energy into developing a relationship with? And what did I have to offer that might be of interest to them? Well, in doing my work, I found out that we both shared an interest for growing the minds of young people, helping them develop to have the skills and tool sets to be able to achieve no matter their beginning is all about how they finish. And as we began to share, even in that small meeting of people at this networking event, a spark was lit, or what I call a relationship catalyst was lit, and that we found out we had some things in common that would allow us to potentially have another conversation. And in that other conversation, we set time aside to even ask salient questions, what I would say intentional questions about what each other were doing around this particular interest. Well, fast forward, folks, we built a great relationship, and I found out that that good friend who was leading scouting at the time in Central Florida and I over at the Urban League leading that organization, we found out we could come together. I found out he had things that I needed to learn, and I had some ideas that he wanted to pick my brain on. And what we found was we could foster a partnership around the efforts of raising funds to support our organization. How could we come together? What could I learn from him? What could he learn from me? And then we decided, yeah, this would make a good partnership. One of the outcomes of that was creating a nonprofit roundtable in Orlando, Florida, for nonprofit organizations. And Ron Oates, if you're out there listening, I want to say thank you for being open enough, having the right attitude, interest in what I was talking about, to share that things that we could do in our community to improve the youth. Ron Oates was the executive director of the Central Florida Scouting for Boy Scouts at that time, and just was an incredible person who poured into my life through that relationship that allowed me to learn how to build and develop the skill sets to go out and partner with other people to then be able to determine whether or not our shared outcomes would allow us to partner for the greater outcome. But it all comes back to curiosity. Had I not taken the time to understand more about him and understand more about my environment and where I wanted to go and who could potentially help, and even though his name was mentioned in passing, that is someone I needed to meet, I needed to have the curiosity to go out and do the discovery. to understand more about this person, scholarship, to learn and be intentional about understanding he was and not just knowing who he was. Hope that makes sense because what I'm really talking about is that through my curiosity, it helped me drive growth for the Urban League organization I was leading actually, and helped me build connections with a real person who could help me build other connections by sponsoring. We'll talk about that in the next episode, which opening doors to other people that may not have been open to me. But it took time in me sharing who I was, making sure that my reputation, my credibility, and my consistency was showing up on a regular basis during my interactions with others that he may know. One of the questions I was asked about when I was consider joining another agency or another organization was, what would people say about you when you're not in the room? And one of the things I want people to think about is people are going to talk, whether you're in the room or you're not. They're going to have a curiosity to know you and not just to know your credentials. What is your elevator speech? What is your talk? What is your conversation that would inspire them to say, I want to sit down and have a beverage with this person, maybe coffee, maybe something else with an ice cube. But I want to sit down and I want to invest some of my intellectual capital, my time into this person to learn more about them and see how they can either help me achieve a goal or how maybe I may be able to partner with them. I think at our core, most people really do want to learn how to help each other and help you grow and help you benefit the organizations that we all serve. One of the things I would say is that as we commit to different things, we must really, as leaders, commit to learning about people and not just about processes. Many times we'll get a guide and we'll follow the step-by-step guides. And a lot of people look at Engage, Rest, Grow and see that it's the blueprint for building and mastering relationships. But it really is giving you the foundations of what it takes to be a great person and a great keeper of solid, beneficial relationships that are long lasting. I can think of ones that I've started while I was in the Marine Corps that we pick up like we had never stopped talking or never been apart. And I've been out of the Corps 30 plus years. So there you go. For everybody who wanted to know, it's been about 30 plus years. But what I want to talk about when I say that leaders must commit to learning about people, they got to understand the why behind the behaviors and not just the outcomes. What is your why for wanting to learn about that person and develop that relationship? Is it intentional? Is it happenstance? You just happen to be in the room and you took advantage of it? But I think when you plan out what you're trying to do and understand what your why is as to why you want to build relationships with certain people, it leads to better outcomes. And growth minded leaders always ask, what can I learn? I love it when I had the opportunity to be in the room with John Maxwell, and he talks about taking out the yellow pad of paper and sitting down and asking questions of the great basketball coach for UCLA. And he said, I had a pad and I had about 2 days of questions and only an hour and a half to ask them in. John was so good at his asking and his interest and in his why he was asking these questions and in what he could learn from the conversation that he would end up not only getting the hour that he'd scheduled with the coach, but he actually followed him and they built a great relationship over the course of years to where they were both always pouring back into each other and continuing to grow. Now, John Maxwell will tell you his name's John and he's your friend. But I think one of the biggest things I learned from John Maxwell's leadership training and in interaction with him is he put people first and he really does care. And he really wants to know, what can I learn from this brief interaction? I want to challenge you that in your scholarship section of building your relationship, challenge yourself to ask, what can I learn from this conversation? What can I learn from this chance meeting with this person? What can I learn from building a relationship? Because that's how we learn how to nurture it, or what I call make relationship deposits and give back and pour into the relationship. It's those nuggets that help us then when it's time to make a withdrawal, have people align with us on our journey and help us accomplish the great outcomes. The third thing I want to talk about here when under scholarships is really, I spoke about it earlier, is developing that cultural humility and the emotional intelligence. Understanding that humility are hallmarks of effective leadership. Have you ever been in a room where somebody's boasting about their achievements and boasting about what they've done, but how many of us really remember how they did it or why they did it? If we take a moment and we really develop the humility of listening and learning and understanding what it means to be a good listener, a person that then can take that information, which is the scholarship piece that I'm talking about, and process it and say, how can I help Allie achieve what he's trying to do? Or me sitting in a room and saying, how can I help this person through their journey get to the next level? What tools do I have in my tool bag? What relationships can I open a door for? Many a time, one of my mentees or a young person, as my wife loves to say, I'm everybody's favorite uncle, will come to me and say, hey, through your crazy experiences, through your lifetime, through your wild journey, you know, can you help me navigate or get here? I'm trying to make this decision. Well, it's easier to help that person if I understand that person, if I know a bit about that person, if I know what their goals and their life pursuits are all about. I'm able to pour into them some of my experience and then help them make the decision. One of the greatest things I learned for coaching is coaches, if we tell you our story too much, we're no longer coaching, we're actually using you as an outlet. But one of the great things is to be able to share an experience and then ask questions and then hold you accountable to understanding and laying out your goals and then hold you accountable to achieving it. See, because I think when you do that, that is, you have to have spent the time learning and learning with the intent to really build a relationship with that person. And then before you move into partnership, you then now understand whether or not you can work together, whether or not there's shared interests, whether or not there are shared outcomes. I think when we do that, the continuous learning of each other fosters empathy and accountability, particularly when we're looking at people from different backgrounds, different walks of life, different educational pursuits. It's amazing to come across somebody that may not have the same background as you, but you have the same shared interest and what can be created when you bring together those diverse interactions. I think, Franz Johansson captures that really well in his book, The Medici Effect, when he talks about disparate things, different walks coming together, bringing their interests and their understandings, and then intersecting. And when they intersect, they create something new. Now, Franz was speaking from a DEI perspective, and I know that those three letters have been kind of villainized. But I'll tell you, when you can bring together the precision execution of a NASCAR pit crew, along with the innovative thinkers of Maybelline and their cosmetics, and you create a new way of creating a brush for applying mascara because of the interaction and watching how this team has laid out every tool or thought about every nuance or thought about the engineering of how they prepare that car to make sure that it's running around the track properly. When you bring those teams together, they both learn totally different worlds coming together. Franz does a better job of explaining it in his book, but I will tell you, when you bring people together from shared backgrounds or different backgrounds, let me say, you're bringing together their life journey, their lived experience, and it may open an aha moment that allows you to create something magnificent and out of this world. I had the pleasure of serving with a lot of Imagineers at Walt Disney Imagineering and watching Blue Sky and watching the innovative minds walk in that room with a blank canvas and walking out with incredible attractions and then doing the research to back it up. Again, if you really break it down, they came in with open minds, listened to each other, worked together. They've developed relationships that have lasted for decades. And then that trust allowed them to create and open their creative juices to create some of the most incredible things that you enjoy in Walt Disney parks and resorts. I just love the creativity and the interaction, but I really got an opportunity to observe real relationships built over a number of years by listening, learning, and then leaning in. You'll hear me talk about the three L's because I really believe the three L's of learning and the three L's of leadership are the ability to listen, build that, use scholarship, use the understanding that you develop of an individual to then determine whether or not you can create huge partnerships or a shared interest. And then in that shared interest, what outcomes can you achieve together because you're sharing truly who you are? You've humbled yourself, a little bit of humility, but you've also built up your emotional intelligence to really understand that people have value when we take the time to build powerful relationships. I think about one time when, as a young Marine, I was learning new stuff. I was originally, folks, when I took the Myers Briggs exam, an introvert. You probably say, "Well, that's impossible," but truly, I was. And but through my learned experience in the Marine Corps, where they had you get up and learn how to speak by delivering classes to each other on the equipment that we used, they were developing leaders. They were developing public speakers, and here I am a few decades later, using the talents that were taught to me that I learned from others and having other people pour into my learning helped me grow to become the leader that I was in the Corps, that would then transcend into my leadership through corporate and nonprofit America, and now sitting here before you hosting a podcast all over the world. It's a real cool opportunity, and I would encourage you to always develop that cultural humility and the emotional intelligence to really appreciate people who may have the same shared interests or who may be just a little different in their approach, in their attitudes, and the things that they desire to do. It's amazing when relationships really do become fruitful from the fact that we've learned about each other before we ever try to move to doing business, working together, building a team. We spend just a moment to learn about people. We often call them meet and greets. Those are the relationship catalysts that can lead to further discussions. You heard me talk about not carrying around business cards forever, but responding within 24 to 48 hours of receiving one begins to also show that there's an interest. And what that interest shouldn't be is just about the transaction that can take place. It should be about what value can be built between the two people once they come together and understand each other. And is there an opportunity to partner to go out and accomplish great things? As I get ready to close, what I think about is I want to encourage you to also have feedback loops and knowledge sharing. And if you're in an organization, always create time that you can sit around the table and just share about life, but also share about projects and have an openness to where you can hear some feedback and honestly take it so that it improves you and grows you. I don't think learning is a luxury, it's a leadership necessity. If we establish the ability to learn by listening, learning, and leaning in, if we establish the time to really invest in people, they'll help us grow and help us to and create some incredible things. In reflection, as I think about it, my question would be to you: what have you recently learned about someone else's lived experience that may also help you propel a relationship to help you get to where you want to be or get to an outcome that you're desiring to achieve or to land a position? How many people have reached out when they're looking for a new position, really looked at LinkedIn and see who you know at the company that you desire to work for that may be able to give you some insight, that may be able to help you understand what the culture or the environment is in the organization to make sure that it fits where you want to be rather than just chasing a title or a name and finding out when you arrive at that destination that it's not the organization you had thought it to be. But had you taken the time to be curious, reach out, navigate LinkedIn to understand what's going on with the organization that I'm seeking to become involved with, and then how can I best position myself to be an asset to that team or to that organization once you arrive? When you do that, though, by listening to somebody else's lived experience, they can share with you some of the things that they've encountered. They can share with you the pluses, they can share with you some of the minuses, and then help you make a better lived decision for you to move forward. If you're following along with the reflections journal, what I would always say is also, let's ask the question that you should be asking, which is, when I'm building a mutually beneficial relationship, where do I need to be more curious and less certain? I know, being now a well seasoned and well tenured individual in this life's journey, I tend to come in with preconceived notions sometimes, and I have to purposely stop and say, let me be a little bit more curious and learn about this, as opposed to just thinking I know already. For example, artificial intelligence. A lot of people are saying, well, it's replacing jobs and it's cutting people out of the workforce. It'd be easier to fall into that belief system. But in talking with my wife, what I've learned is AI is such an incredible tool. My godfather talks about it all the time. It's a tool that helps us to get things done more efficiently, quicker, but it doesn't replace the knowledge that we have in our head. We have to feed it information in order for it to be able to produce what we're looking for. Using AI as an example, if I had a closed mind and no curiosity, I may actually look at it from a different standpoint and think that it was replacing me or develop a negative attitude about it. I can tell you, folks, I'm learning about AI every day and learning how it can help me enhance and do the work that I want to do to help make a difference in teaching people how to lead and build highly performing teams that are people first focused. Because when you put people first, they'll give you the best in everything that they do. The other thing I want to ask before I close out the show is, what book or podcast, hopefully it's off the record, the Real Talk podcast, or expanded experience that has expanded your perspective? Where are you plugging in to learn new and different things? Break it down in one word. Where are you being curious? What is interesting? Comment, like, send me a note. You can write me at otrwithallie@gmail.com. Drop me a note. Tell me what interesting experience that you've just recently had that helped expand your perspective. Because guess what, folks? That's scholarship. It's, again, learning from our lived experiences, learning about each other helps us to build credible relationships, mutually rewarding relationships that inspire people to move on and inspire people to achieve great heights. So, my call to action to you today is, in your next step section of the journal, or just your next step is, if this episode has challenged or inspired you, I ask that you would share it with your team or your circle. I ask that you normalize growth, curiosity, and cultural understanding as leadership tools. They should be in your tool bag. You should always have a growth mentality that seeks curiosity, that uses curiosity or leverages curiosity to seek more understanding. That a cultural understanding as a leadership tool is something that's powerful, because when you can inspire people and let them know that they're your first pursuit, that their safety, their psychological safety, in an environment where they can thrive in is something that you're helping to create, they'll learn how to give you even more of themselves and not feel as though they've left something on the table. I would ask that you would also continue to subscribe to Off the Record, the Real Talk podcast. Join me here each Wednesday at 6 o'clock. I'm going to show up, because if it's Wednesday and it's 6 p.m., it's Off the Record with Allie. The last thing I would say is that if you want a free Chip's Reflection Journal to go deeper so that you can capture your information, go to my LinkedIn or go to Off the Record Facebook page and drop in the comments SHIP plus your email, the word SHIP in all caps, plus your email, and we'll send out one of the reflection journals for you to follow along. Folks, it's always a great time to just sit and chat with you. I could probably go on forever. But as I wrap this up, I want to challenge you to engage in scholarship. Learn with the desire to understand and not just to know. And when you couple that with partnering for a purpose, sponsoring with the goal of helping people achieve the greatest things, and then managing it through ownership, nurturing it, constantly depositing before we make withdrawals, you too will build mutually rewarding relationships that will last you a lifetime. Wrote a book about it called Engaging Guests Best Grow, the blueprint for building powerful relationships. Please check it out. Hope everything is well in your world. And I'll see you next Wednesday on Off the Record, the Real Talk podcast with Allie Braswell. Have a great rest of your week. Look forward to seeing you next week.